Most people are waiting for the right moment, the perfect opportunity, the secret that will change everything without requiring them to change anything. They are waiting to feel ready, waiting for the circumstances to align, waiting for someone to discover them, or for luck to finally decide to show up. And while they wait, something is happening that they are not paying attention to. The time is passing. The dreams are cooling. The version of themselves they always imagined becoming is getting further away, not closer, with every day that passes in the comfort of waiting. And the most devastating part is not the waiting itself. It is the reason for it. Most people are not waiting because they lack talent. They have enough of that. They are not waiting because the opportunities never come. Opportunities appear for everyone. They are waiting because deep down, beneath all the plans and the intentions and the vision boards and the goals written in notebooks, there's a truth they have been carefully avoiding. The life they want costs something. Not money, not connections, not luck. Something more personal and more demanding than any of those things. It costs sacrifice, and most people are not willing to pay that price. Not because they are weak, not because they do not care, but because nobody ever told them clearly and honestly what the price actually is and why paying it is not a loss, but the most powerful investment a human being can make. James Allen wrote that the outer conditions of a person's life will always reflect their inner beliefs. And one of the most common inner beliefs, held quietly and unconsciously by the people whose lives never become what they were capable of, is that greatness should be available without total commitment. That there should be a version of the extraordinary life that does not require giving up the ordinary comforts. That sacrifice is something that happens to unlucky people, not something you choose. That belief is the most expensive one you will ever carry. And by the time this video is over, you are going to understand why, and you're going to understand what it actually means to pay the price that the life you want is asking for. Let's start by changing the way you see sacrifice. Because the reason most people avoid it is not that they are unwilling to work hard. It is that they have the wrong picture of what sacrifice actually is. They see it as loss, as giving something up, as becoming smaller, as arriving at the end of the sacrifice with less than you had at the beginning. And from that picture, avoiding sacrifice looks like wisdom. Why would you voluntarily make yourself smaller? But that picture is wrong. Completely, fundamentally wrong. James Allen wrote that you are today where your thoughts have brought you. And what he also understood was that the thoughts that bring you somewhere extraordinary are not the same thoughts that feel comfortable in ordinary circumstances. They require a different quality of commitment, a different relationship with discomfort, a different understanding of what you are actually doing when you give something up in pursuit of something greater. Sacrifice is not loss. Sacrifice is exchange. You're not giving something away into nothing. You are trading something small for something large, something immediate for something lasting, something comfortable for something meaningful. Every hour you give to the work instead of to the entertainment is not an hour lost. It is an hour invested in a future that the person who chose the entertainment will never have. Every relationship you distance yourself from because it pulls you back toward who you used to be is not a connection broken. It is space created for connections that align with who you are becoming. Every pleasure you postpone, every comfort you release, every easy path you refuse to take is not a deprivation. It is a seed planted in soil that will produce something that no amount of comfort ever could. James Allen wrote that the vision that you glorify in your mind, the ideal that you enthrone in your heart, this you will build your life by, and building it requires the material that only sacrifice can provide. Not talent, not intelligence, not the perfect circumstances. The willingness to give what others are not willing to give, consistently, invisibly, without the guarantee of immediate reward. There was a man named Daniel. He had a vision for his life that was clear and specific and genuinely exciting to him. He knew what he wanted to build. He understood why it mattered. He had the skills and the intelligence to make it real. What he did not have was the willingness to pay the full price. He wanted the result without the full sacrifice. He wanted to build something extraordinary while keeping the routines and the relationships and the habits of someone building something ordinary. And for years, that half commitment produced exactly half results. The vision was real, but the life did not change because he kept meeting the sacrifice halfway and wondering why the destination was still so far away. One day, something shifted in his understanding. He stopped asking, "How do I get there?" and started asking, "What am I not willing to give up that is keeping me here?" And the answer, when he looked at it honestly, was uncomfortable. There were things he was holding on to not because they were valuable, but because releasing them felt like loss. Habits that felt like identity. Relationships that felt like loyalty. Comforts that felt like necessities. But none of them were moving him toward what he actually wanted. They were just familiar. And familiarity, he finally understood, is the most seductive enemy of growth there is. When he started releasing those things, not all at once, but deliberately and honestly, one by one, something began to change. Not in his circumstances, not immediately, but in the quality of what he was building, because he was finally paying the full price. And the full price, James Allen understood, is the only price that actually buys anything worth having. Now let's talk about something that most people who pursue success never fully reckon with. The sacrifice that nobody sees. Because there's a version of sacrifice that is visible and even admirable. The early mornings, the long hours, the obvious hard work that people around you can observe and acknowledge and respect. That kind of sacrifice is real and it matters. But it is not the kind that separates the people who build something extraordinary from the people who work hard their entire lives and never quite get there. The kind that makes that difference is invisible. It is the sacrifice nobody applauds because nobody knows it is happening. The nights you stayed in when everyone else went out and there was no audience to witness your discipline. The hours you spent studying and building and improving when there was nothing immediate to show for it and no one asking whether you were doing it. The times you said no to opportunities that looked good but did not serve your vision, and you could not even explain the refusal in terms that made sense to the people around you. The conversations you did not have, the conflicts you absorbed without reaction, the criticism you carried without collapsing under it, all of it unseen, all of it uncelebrated, all of it deposited quietly into an account that nobody can see from the outside. James Allen wrote that the body is the servant of the mind, but he also understood that the mind is the servant of its habits, and the habits that produce extraordinary results are almost entirely invisible. They are built in private, practiced in silence, sustained without reward for months, and sometimes years before anything outside begins to reflect what has been built within. And here is the cruel irony that most people who are watching from the outside never understand. By the time the results become visible, by the time the success is obvious and undeniable, everyone who sees it will call it luck. They will say you were in the right place at the right time. They will say you had advantages they did not. They will say something found you rather than understanding that you built something invisibly and patiently and at great personal cost until it became impossible to ignore. Not luck. Sacrifice accumulated over time, in the dark, without an audience, because the vision was clear enough to sustain the effort even when nothing else was. There was a woman named Catherine. She had been building something for 3 years, invisibly, while the people around her watched and wondered what she was doing and whether it was going anywhere. She had given up things they could see, time with friends, money spent on development instead of entertainment, opportunities that would have been comfortable but would have taken her in the wrong direction. And she had given up things they could not see, the need to be understood, the desire to explain herself, the hunger for validation that never came because nobody could see what she was building well enough to validate it yet. 3 years of invisible sacrifice. And then one day the thing she had been building became visible. And the people who had watched her strange, quiet discipline for 3 years said the same thing everyone always says. You were so lucky. She did not correct them, because she understood something James Allen had been pointing at all along. The people who build extraordinary lives are not the lucky ones. They're the ones who paid the price that the lucky-seeming outcome required. In full, in advance, in silence. Now let's talk about the kind of sacrifice that most people never examine honestly. Because when most people think about sacrifice, they think about time and effort and physical work. And those things matter. They are real and necessary, and the people who are not willing to give them will never build anything that lasts. But they are not the only price. And for many people, they are not even the hardest price. The hardest sacrifice is not the time. It is the need for approval. Think about how much of your life has been shaped by the desire to be seen favorably by the people around you. How many decisions have you made based not on what served your vision, but on what would be understood or accepted or admired by the people whose opinion you were seeking? How many times have you softened your ambition to fit inside the expectations of people who are not going anywhere? How many times have you chosen the path that made sense to others over the path that made sense to you? James Allen wrote that the man who does not control his thoughts is controlled by them. And the need for approval is one of the most powerful, uncontrolled thoughts most people carry. It operates below the level of conscious awareness, shaping choices and limiting possibilities without ever announcing itself clearly enough to be challenged. Sacrificing that need, making the genuine decision that your vision matters more than the opinions of people who are not living your life, is one of the most difficult and most liberating sacrifices there is. Not because other people's opinions become irrelevant, but because they stop being the primary currency you are trading for your decisions. The second sacrifice that most people avoid is the sacrifice of relationships that do not serve growth. This one is painful in a way that no amount of intellectual understanding fully prepares you for. Because the people who pull you back toward who you used to be are not usually your enemies. They're often people you genuinely love, people who have been part of your life for a long time, people who are not trying to limit you and may not even be aware that they're doing it. But the environment they create, the expectations they hold, the version of you they are comfortable with, that environment is incompatible with the growth you're trying to achieve. And you cannot be fully in two environments at the same time. You cannot give your full energy to becoming someone new while spending your primary time with people who are most comfortable with who you used to be. James Allen wrote that circumstances do not make the man, they reveal him. And the people you surround yourself with are among the most powerful circumstances shaping who you are becoming. The sacrifice of those relationships, made not with cruelty, but with honesty and the quiet understanding that you're going somewhere and not everyone is going with you, is one of the prices that the extraordinary life asks for. And it is not optional. The third sacrifice is the hardest to articulate and perhaps the most important. It is the sacrifice of the version of yourself that is comfortable, the self that knows how to operate inside the current life, the self that has figured out how to navigate the current circumstances and has developed strategies and habits and ways of being that work well enough within the current limits. That self is not a failure. It got you here, but it cannot get you there, because the person capable of building something extraordinary is not the same person who built the life you currently have. And becoming that person requires sacrificing the comfort of the current one, the familiar patterns, the known responses, the identity that feels like you because it has been practiced for so long. James Allen wrote that every man is where he is by the law of his being. And changing where you are requires changing the law, which means changing who you are, which means sacrificing who you currently are in favor of who you are capable of becoming. That is the deepest sacrifice, and it is the one that makes all the others possible. Now let's talk about what happens when sacrifice becomes not something you do, but something you are. Because there is a fundamental difference between the person who makes sacrifices and the person who has made sacrifice a way of life. The first person experiences sacrifice as an ongoing series of difficult individual decisions, each one requiring a fresh act of willpower, each one costing something in energy and attention, and the ongoing negotiation between comfort and commitment. That person will sacrifice when the motivation is high and when the vision is clear and when the circumstances make the sacrifice feel worth it. But when the motivation is low and the vision has become obscured by the difficulty of the present moment and the circumstances feel more like walls than like temporary obstacles, that person will often stop because they're relying on willpower to sustain the sacrifice, and willpower is not a renewable resource. The second person does not experience sacrifice as a series of decisions. They experience it as identity. Sacrifice is not what they do in service of a goal. It is who they are in relationship to the world. The choice to give the best to what matters most, to refuse the easy path when the meaningful one is available, to trade the immediate for the lasting. That choice is not made fresh each morning. It was made once at the level of identity, and everything that follows flows from it. James Allen wrote that a man becomes what he repeatedly does, and the person who repeatedly chooses sacrifice over comfort, not in grand dramatic moments, but in the ordinary, invisible daily ones, eventually stops being someone who chooses sacrifice and becomes someone for whom sacrifice is the default. That transformation is the most powerful thing that can happen to a human being who wants to build something extraordinary, because it removes the ongoing cost of the decision. The energy that used to go into negotiating with yourself about whether to sacrifice or not becomes available for the actual building. The discipline that used to require constant effort becomes automatic. The vision that used to feel fragile and distant starts to feel inevitable. Not because the circumstances changed, because you did. There was a man named Richard. He had tried to build discipline around sacrifice for years with inconsistent results. Strong periods followed by collapse, commitment followed by retreat, the familiar cycle of starting well and eventually returning to the familiar patterns. One day, he stopped trying to make better choices and started making a different kind of decision altogether. He decided not what he would sacrifice today, but who he was. He decided that he was someone for whom sacrifice was not a cost, but a commitment, not a temporary effort, but a permanent orientation. And from that decision, made once and then honored in every subsequent moment, everything changed. Not because the sacrifices became easier, they did not, but because they stopped being optional. They were no longer things he was trying to make himself do. They were expressions of who he had decided he was. James Allen wrote that as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And Richard had finally thought himself into being someone for whom the extraordinary life was not a destination, but a natural consequence of who he was every day. Let me leave you with the truth that James Allen returned to again and again throughout everything he ever wrote. The outer world is always a reflection of the inner one. What you have is what you are. What you achieve is the expression of who you have been willing to become. And who you are willing to become is measured, more precisely than anything else, by what you are willing to sacrifice to get there. Not occasionally, not when the motivation is high and the vision is clear and the cost feels worth it. Every day, in the invisible moments when nobody is watching and there's nothing to gain from making the harder choice except the compound interest of the person you are becoming. Every sacrifice you make is the most powerful declaration you can offer about your own future. It says, I believe in what I am building enough to give this up for it. I believe in who I am becoming enough to release who I currently am. I believe in the life that is possible enough to stop settling for the life that is comfortable. That declaration, made in the silence of each individual choice, each small renuncia that nobody sees and nobody celebrates, is what builds the extraordinary life from the inside out. Not talent, not luck, not the perfect circumstances arriving at the perfect moment. The accumulated weight of every sacrifice you made when you could have chosen comfort instead. James Allen spent his entire life writing about this, in the simplest and most demanding language he could find. You become what you sacrifice for. And the life you're living right now is the exact reflection of the sacrifices you have been willing to make until now. If you want a different reflection, you know what to do. Pay the price. All of it. In advance. In silence. Without waiting for anyone to see it or acknowledge it or tell you that it is worth it. Because it is worth it. Not because of what it produces, although what it produces is extraordinary, but because of what it makes you. Someone who paid the full price for a life worth living. Someone who did not settle for the comfortable version of themselves. Someone who looked at everything the extraordinary life was asking for and said yes. All of it. Starting now. If this video moves something in you, if something you heard today made you stop and think, like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to explore together. See you in the next one.